Introduce our speaker for today. Here you go, Elizabeth.
Hi, I want to introduce Ryan Wynett. He's from the Underground Freedom Center. And we just kind of wandered in there and we're talking to him. And he talked about some of the stuff he does with some organizations, businesses. And I thought one of the more interesting things was he was doing a presentation on diversity in the workplace, and the only people that were invited were minorities. None of the white folks showed up. So kind of interesting who they decided to invite. So I'm not sure what Ryan is exactly going to be talking about, but I'd like to introduce him, and I think he's going to do a great job.
Okay, good. Ooh.
Real close.
Okay, so I'm not supposed to start next to this. Is this too loud?
No.
Okay. Okay, good. Everybody see? Good. Okay. So yeah, actually what Elizabeth was talking about was I did I was a speaker for a Luncheon Learn for the city of Cincinnati in February, and there was supposed to be like 40 people there, and there were 15. And there was actually one white guy, and I have jokingly said at the end, where are all the white guys? And this older black woman raised her hand, and I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, this might not be what we're talking about here today, but I found out this morning that my boss, Ralph, God love him, he's white, and I found out this morning that he only forwarded this email to the black employees. Is that what we're talking about? I said, yes, ma'am. That's exactly what we're talking about. Because guess who knows what it's like to be black more than any other group? Black people. So, Anyway, so let's get going. Like she said, like Elizabeth said, I'm Ryan Wynett, and I'm the manager of Open Your Mind, which is the Freedom Center's implicit bias exhibit. Now, the Freedom Center's always been in the business of trying to fight discrimination, which is definitely an uphill battle. So we have everything from talking about the Underground Railroad in the United States, apartheid in South Africa, civil rights, LGBT rights, et cetera, et cetera. But over the last 50 years, we've learned things from psychology that shows us, while yeah, this still is an uphill battle, it's more like just the tip of the iceberg, because what is going on beneath the surface, outside of conscious awareness and intent, is a huge driver in terms of what is going on in problems in society. And at the end of the day, a lot of discrimination has to be unintentional for the simple reason that a lot of thinking is unintentional, right? The vast majority of all cognition. So today we're talking about blind spots. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to identify blind spots. Take it in. It's a deep cartoon. He doesn't know that that's not part of the landscape, right? If we could see blind spots, they wouldn't be blind spots. I'm telling you, it's a good cartoon. And that's the key. If anybody's looking for the secret to a good slide deck, it is very few words on the page, okay? And don't read the ones that are on the page. So to illustrate the idea of a blind spot, we're going to do a little exercise. So this is a pitch for an ad for Coca-Cola, okay? Think of it like a billboard ad on the side of the road, okay? So Coca-Cola wanted this to be put into Dubai, okay? So they pitched it in Dubai, and people know where Dubai is? It's in the Middle East, okay? So the folks in Dubai, they said, no way, this won't work here, and they rejected it immediately. Why do you think this wouldn't work in Dubai?
Because they read Arabic, and Arabic is read right to left.
I should have asked people if they really thought they knew the answer, because that is the correct answer.
Like, there you are, you drink it, you die.
Yes, as opposed to Coke, which was you're really thirsty, and then you drink the Coke, and then Coke gives you energy.
So if they swapped the pictures around, it would work.
Yes.
Maybe.
Or they did it from top to
Please
bottom.
repeat the question and answer.
So the question is, what as a story does this tell you about Coca-Cola? And for most people, the answer is that Coke gives you energy. That is not the case if you read Arabic and or Hebrew, which are both read right to left. Now, one guy got it here instantly. Recently, I did a talk for the National Conference of American Rabbis, and about half of them got it. So this is a group of people that spend a lot of their professional lives reading a document right to left. Very few other people get it, right? This is like the equivalent of the Chevy Nova, which Chevy released in Mexico, and Nova in Spanish means
No go.
No go. It's like cultural incompetency. So, let's, there we go. So,
Olak mean?
sir,
What does Olak mean? Alak?
I don't know. What?
Cola backwards, what does it mean?
It's the picture.
But I would say Olak, yeah. Olak, Ols, yeah. But no, that wasn't the reason. I mean, the answers I hear on a daily basis is because Dubai's more than sand, because he's white, because he's in shorts, because there's an incongruence between the animation and the real life. But no, it's because they read right to left, right? And you can know that Arabic is read right to left, and yet very few people get this. Our reactions to the world are a function of our experiences in the world, okay? Directly, more importantly, I think a lot of the time, indirectly. So, for me, implicit and explicit bias, which are not terms that anybody really uses in day-to-day life, it's true, I mean, it's a big issue. They boil down to the difference between intentional and unintentional discrimination. And so, let's go through a couple examples. This is unambiguous, right? We go looking for a restroom in 1929 in this country. This is from Tennessee. This is what we locate. Colored, white. You go across the hall from my exhibit on the first floor of the Freedom Center on whatever today is, June 18, 2015. Let's say there's a group of white and black 8th graders trying to wash their hands in there. The black 8th graders on average are going to have a noticeably harder time getting these well, we have faucets. These are soap dispensers. But every day, anybody that's black or of color has a significantly harder time activating these things at the Freedom Center. Also, a lot of places. Does anybody know how these types of things work? So I actually got corrected by an engineer who I kept saying laser, but he's like, no, it's not, you can't say that. He's like near infrared. And I was like, okay. So use a near infrared light that bounces light out across the basin of the sink, or in this case underneath here. And when most white people, not all the time because everybody has issues, but the majority of the time, when the vast majority of the people in this room go into places like this, you put out your hand, the light hits your hand, it goes back to the faucet to effectively complete the circuit, and that's how it knows when to turn on and off. If you are dark enough, the light does not bounce back because it's absorbed. So every day, I see black people and they're going, what am I doing wrong? You know, is this thing broken? Am I doing it incorrectly? And the white people next to her are going, what are you talking about? Psh. So who would ever think it's baked into the cake on that level, right? And I think it becomes a really strong metaphor for everything we're talking about today, which is, if I've never had a hard time washing my hands, why would I believe anybody else has, right? And that's what we're talking about, the idea that, oh, thank you, that a lot of people in this country have a hard time washing their hands. This is from the Freedom Center's archives. It's incredible how many soap brands were built on the brand equity. Our soap is so great, it will turn your black child white.
Oh, no.
Yeah, right? This is from the early 1900s. It is the more tame of this series. This is Dove, if I can get it to... Yeah, it's hard to imagine, and yet, like, I also have to imagine that since every time in history, people look back and think, wow, how could that have happened? There's no way that we're not doing things right now that people are going to look back and think, wow, how could they have done that? So, I don't know why this isn't working. But, let's see. This is Dove. Dove's had a couple of these failures. There we go. So, what do you think the problem with this was a few years ago? What did people interpret this product? Right? And or thinner. Yeah. So white and or thin is what this product was telling some people. Obviously that's not their goal, and yet again and again and again, it is not a Procter & Gamble product, despite what like 1 out of 4 people think. They're like, I'm not going to buy P&G stuff anymore. I'm like, well, that sucks because it's a Unilever product. So this is from the South in the 1950s. Again, this is obvious. This is from Philadelphia last year at a Starbucks, when these young black gentlemen were waiting for the 3rd member of their meeting before ordering anything, which is, you know, the polite thing to do, and they were ultimately escorted out by police in handcuffs after wanting to use the bathroom. I found this was a big moment in this conversation because in the work I've done over the last few years, I've learned that 99.9% of the problems that would uniquely face a black person or a black family do not even kind of face white people a little bit. And that's the reason the sympathy and empathy break down. If you're not being pulled over for being white, it is borderline beyond belief that people are getting pulled over just for being black. And if they are, they're doing something wrong. I assure you, a lot of them aren't, right? So, Selma, Alabama. 1931. Denver, Colorado, 2014. If you asked a group of school kids to make another pool safety poster to illustrate what to do and what not to do, would you make the same one, or would you want them to make the same one? Let's start with who's doing what's right. Let's start there.
Oh, white kids.
And that largely gets ignored a lot of the time when we're talking about bias, is always worrying about the negative stuff, which is an issue. But simultaneously, as all the black and minority kids are being pointed out as doing something wrong, the white people are being reinforced as doing something right, okay? And then let's walk through who's not cool. Latino, black, Asian with the glass bottle, black girl, black, black. He looks like he's in trouble for drowning, which is not cool, you know, to be honest. And I don't know what he's in trouble for, because he can't be diving because she's about to dive. I guess she didn't wait to clear out of the way. So, not 1970, 80, 90, or 2000, 2014. And the Red Cross is, you know, not historically known for being terrible people. My theory is, if you Google Red Cross pool safety poster, the images that'll come up, other than this, are just a very similar template. You know, probably a dozen of them going back 40 years. And the vast majority of them are just of white people. I bet whoever created this in Denver walked away thinking, nailed it. You know, job well done, diversity achieved, right? And so it becomes a question. It becomes a question of like, is it better not to be invited to this particular party, or you know, invited this way? And if I throw this into 100 middle school kids, white and black, the black kids will immediately see something off. They'll think it's totally intentional, which I've learned to 100% understand why they think that. And the white kids and sometimes their close classmates will not see anything off, and then ultimately totally agree with what I just conjectured. So, okay. So what is implicit bias? Again, this is one of the problems is it suffers from these kind of really dry academic, you know, nebulous definitions. So what I found is really useful is a practical demonstration, and I'm going to double down on this more than normal based on your performance on the other things. So I'm going to give you guys a riddle, and I'll say it twice slowly, and the only rule, I'll say it one more time, the only rule is that please don't blurt out answers. It's the only thing I ask, okay? Because the answer is not nearly as important as the thought process. Now, there's always a situation where I say this so clearly and in my mind, like, unambiguously, and yet as soon as I'm done, somebody shouts out the answer. Please do not be another one of these groups, because I resent these groups every time. I mean, I like them until now, but whenever it happens, I'm like, wow, you know, this is what's wrong with this country. So I know it sounds like over the top, but it's important to me, okay? So here we go, and you can whisper amongst your neighbors or remain quiet, but like, just wait a couple seconds. So here we go. All 7 of these ballet dancers are raising children. 5 are biological mothers, and 2 are not. Take a couple seconds and think of 3 ways that the other dancers could be raising children. Now, I'll repeat it, and keep in mind, they're not together. 7 dancers are raising 7 children. 5 are biological moms, and 2 are not. What are 3 relationships, i.e. adoption, that could exist between those other dancers and the children they're raising? Take a couple seconds and think of that. Perfect, that's fine. It's probably somebody calling in with an answer. Somebody phoned a friend.
Or a pledge.
Yes. So, what about the funny answer, which I hear pretty often? They could be lifting them in the air. Anybody get that? That's too bad. Actually raising children. Come on, guys. So we got maybe foster, a surrogate maybe. That doesn't really count, but people say it. Surrogate, maybe stepchild. What else?
Other family members.
You did, and I would say it is another family member. What other family member could it be? Sure. Okay, gay couple. What? So they would be who? Who would they be? Okay. So these are adopted. Yeah, these are all good. These are good answers. The answer is they're biological fathers. Right. This is the photo shoot from the original Rainbow Legs poster. Okay. I know that because this woman is the wife of a longtime museum employee. That's why I have this. This is from their family archive. So I've done this riddle with about 25,000 people, and 1 out of every 20 will say men, father, dads. 1 out of every 1,000 from 20 feet away, we'll point and say yellow and purple are men, here's why. And you know what those people do for a living every time?
Orthopedist.
They're professional ballet dancers. So far, I mean, I bet orthopedists could, but
Now that you look closer, you can see that the yellow, I can't see the purple slippers, but the yellow slippers are not kosher.
they're leather slippers, exactly. And of course, this again
They have
becomes,
ribbons holding.
they have like rubber bands, they have elastic. And I'm not saying you should have known that, I'm saying the only people that do have a professional reason to know. Everybody else, this is how stereotyping is. We're constantly presented with incomplete information, and then we're filling in the blanks based on our past experience. You're making a best guess. There are a ton of reasons why colorful tights are strongly associated with women in the ballet, but if I had asked first, can men be in the ballet, what would you say? Of course. You know, I've seen them. We're going tonight, whatever. So in practice, this is what implicit bias ends up being. It's that little distance between what we know consciously and what we know automatically, which is, by the way, automatic is all implicit or unconscious truly means. It means you can't help it. It happens. Right? Now, above all else, I found that people do not get bent out of shape about white guys being forgotten in the ballet. It is not a hot button issue, and so it's non-threatening, and people stay off defense, which is like half of the battle I've found. And if I made this same point about race, I'd have people every day saying, I can't be racist. I give to NPR. I shop at Whole Foods. I drive a hybrid. I have black friends. And these are my people, so don't get me wrong. And by the way, that's never going to be black people in my experience, because black people know just because they're black doesn't shield them from having these associations against other black people. No black person has told me in 3 years they can't see white people, that they're colorblind. But I hear that weekly from white people, which is not nearly as sensitive and I think magnanimous as white people want to believe. Because being black is important to black people. It's informed their identity and who they are, and they don't want you to pretend like you can't see something that you can anyway. So when white people tell me that they're colorblind, I say, oh yeah, really? See an eye doctor. So I found that, keeping people off defense is really important. And that's the reason also I introduce bias like this, because bias has such a negative connotation. Show of hands, who feels, if I say bias, who feels like it's a good thing to have? Okay. Who feels like it's a bad thing? Me too. I think some of you aren't participating, but, or you're all just correct and then it's a neutral term, but who said one of these? It is how you use it. Perfect. The only person in the room to have a sandwich, just raise your hand. That's fascinating. I feel like most of you have had a sandwich. Have you guys done this? Okay, great. You've all been biased. You know why? That's all it means. It means to cut something diagonally. It comes from sewing. It's Middle French. So yeah, anybody that knew bias and was thinking, there's no way that's where that comes from, that's where it comes from. Any diagonal cut. It's Middle French for slant. And the reason we have to have biases, or if the term bias feels too negative, preference means the same thing. And the reason you have to have preferences is because you can't remain neutral. You can't get up every morning and have to make all these decisions about the world from scratch. We go crazy. So we outsource the vast majority of our thinking to the unconscious. Think of the opening slides with that iceberg in it. This, you obviously can't see very well, but this is the current up-to-date, these are the biases that are proven to be in every single human brain. Every one of you uses, not all of these every day, but have used every one of these in your life. So there are 206 bones in the human body. I don't know, when we first learned that, but probably in thousands of years, or at least 1,000, I bet. And this is at 188 biases in the human brain and counting, because we have no idea how many there are. These are also the ways that we get through the world, okay? You can't do it all consciously because your brain is an enormous, enormous waster of energy. And so throughout human history, people have tried to explain how the brain works by comparing it to the most advanced inventions of the day. These include the abacus, the telephone switchboard, the water clock, the steam engine, and today the reigning analogy is what? The brain works like a computer. Exactly. And just like the most advanced computer, there's still always some bugs in the system. So every single day, half of everybody tries to walk out of my exhibit by yanking on the push door. Every single day. It's a fire code thing. Not the reason of doing it, the reason there are handles. And everybody's done this. Maybe not this, because this is truly stupid. That's why it's funny. But everybody's done the other thing. And the brain turns out to be kind of like an umpire in baseball, where if it's doing its job really well, you don't even notice it's there. Only when it's making a call that is totally out of line with what we are thinking do you realize the limitations. So there's a nice catch-all term for these terms. Mind bugs. Dr. Banerjee, who's Harvard's head of their psych department and the co-inventor of the implicit association test, has this nice term. And I'll read it because it's short. Mind bugs are ingrained patterns of thought that lead to errors in how we perceive, remember, reason, and make decisions. They are beyond awareness and control. Control, yes, I'm going to try to make you a little more aware of them. People remember the dress a couple years ago? Doesn't really matter if you don't. The people that own the dress are friends of mine. They run the Scientific American Illusion of the Year contest. They're married, and they bought it from the woman in Scotland to study it. And they taught me this. So I got these earlier today. These are coffee sleeves from Starbucks, and this works with any 2 coffee sleeves. You just have to have 2 the same. Does one of these look longer?
Can't hear you.
Does one of these look longer?
Yes.
The bottom, no, I think even still when you think about it, it'll still look longer. Okay, what about now? Is it still the bottom? Let me just make sure. And I'm not, this isn't magic, this is you. So, ta-da. So it's not just, you know, and I know it's working. I used to think like because people look like this blank face stare that it's not working, but I know it is, and you are all wondering what's happening. Why do you think this is happening? Who can tell me? Right? Well, what about, does this straight line say that they're lined up equally?
But they're not,
But why aren't they?
because it's an angled line.
Exactly, right? And so throughout life, when you are lining up things with 90-degree angles, or if you're lining up things to see if they're equally lined up, they do have 90-degree angles, and that's where you can't get away from that thing.
The weft is off.
The weft is off, exactly. Great connection. And it's not limited to vision. It's not limited to vision, sorry. So we're going to do a nice little math problem, and for the people that are good at math, don't worry about it. For the people that are worried about being bad at math, don't worry about it. So the only thing is, I want you to blurt out an answer on this one. Some of you won't, but the majority of you will. Here we go. A baseball bat and a baseball cost $1.10 together. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much is the ball? 10 cents, right? Thank you. That is the wrong answer. Why is it not 10 cents? Because it's 5 cents. How is it 5 cents? What is $1.05 minus 5? $1. What is $1 over 10 cents? If the bat is $1 and the ball's 10 cents, is that $1 more than 10 cents, or is it 90 cents? So this was in the Nobel Prize address of the only pure psychologist to win it, Daniel Kahneman, who won in 2002, and largely for overthrowing, at least beginning to overthrow a lot of Adam Smith stuff. And so there are people thinking, how does this guy even have a job if he doesn't know it's 10 cents? And for those people, I'll just tell you what this high school principal out of Shaker Heights told his kids last year when they didn't understand why I had a job either. And he said, it's a long way back to Cleveland. I'll explain on the bus how $1 and 5 add up to $1.10. So I think that's a pretty concise answer. This one we're going to skip. This one we'll do. On the count of 3, everybody's going to read in a nice, fast pace the color of each of these words. Not what it says, the color. Okay? 1, 2, 3, go.
Red, green, yellow, blue, orange, green, red, green, purple, brown, black, orange.
Okay, that was good. We're going to do it again. More vigor. 1, 2, 3, go.
Red, green, yellow, blue, orange, green, red, green, brown, blue, black, orange.
Okay, good. Now, same kind of vigor, but just so we're clear, on the count of 3, the first 3 things you should be saying are red, green, yellow. The color the word is written in. Okay? 1, 2, 3, go.
Red, green, yellow, blue.
Come on.
Red, black, not a bad test on colorblind.
Black,
They do a lot worse, colorblind. Okay. This is a lot harder, right, the second one? Who, by the way, does equally well on both of these on a given day? Not the colorblind, I'll tell you that right now. little
Who
kids.
does well?
Yeah,
Right.
little kids,
Because you can't read.
because they can't read.
Yeah.
They're not burdened by being able to read. They can't fake it either. Colorblind do significantly worse. And the blind, I think, would do really, really bad. I haven't tested it, but this is called the Stroop effect. It's been around for about 100 years, and it shows that when things share a natural connection, color red, word red, it's easy for our brain to make that jump. When they don't, it's not, and it takes a lot longer to make the same type of decision. I think it also shows at a very deep level, at a visceral level, just how hard it can be to switch out of the traditional ways of doing things, all right? Because it feels hard, it is hard. We do not like things to be hard when we're thinking about them, right? That's why the brain does all this stuff. So, yes,
And we culturally preference language, anyway.
what do you mean by that?
If you talk about who's educated or what's important or almost all the stuff, it's implicit that it has to do with words and not images, not colors.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Hmm? Okay, so you have to repeat the question.
Well, you tried.
It's
You
a
have a-
comment.
Well, I was kind of confused about the question. Yeah, it's more of a comment.
Yeah, I was just saying that, for instance, with the door, the handle and if the handle's on the other side and you're a more visual person, you'll pull because there's a handle, even if the word above it says push.
Yeah, the handle's a much stronger signal than the sign. I mean, you could make that thing in huge font that says pull. The fact that it has a handle is going to elicit a response. In the same way that a door without a handle leads you to push it.
But generally, in the culture, we preference words and language as the important conveyors of meaning. The
Yeah.
important conveyors of meaning and not the visual stuff.
Yeah, okay. So I agree with that.
That's your bias.
Yeah, there you go. Explicitly, yes, like me and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So what do you guys see here? Two things.
A monster.
Two things.
Monster,
A saxophone player.
saxophone player,
Uh,
woman's face, people see both? Okay. The name of this illusion is Sarah Nader. Get it? To serenade. It's funny, yeah.
Yeah, so Sarah's on the
Sarah
right.
Nader, yes. And it is both, right? And we rush to judgment when deciding between this, as we do when we rush to judgment where the stakes actually matter. The brain doesn't really know what's important or not, it just works. It does the same things when we're trying to derive meaning from anything. And situations in life are like this. They're rarely either or. They're almost always both and every situation is open to interpretation. But because we generally just see things for what they are, if you didn't know this was a guy playing a horn or the face of a woman, or rather that there was something else there, this would have remained just those single stories, that single interpretation. And why is this important? Because of this. The same brain processes that create visual illusions also play a really big role in the way we see other people. So this is a civil rights attorney, Brian Stevenson. He talks about getting to court really early one morning, and he's the only one in the room. He's making notes at a table, and a white judge walks in and immediately admonishes him for not having his lawyer present. So there are two basic ways to walk into a courtroom, see a black guy making notes at a table, and jump to conclusions, right? He's an attorney waiting for his client. He's a client waiting for his attorney. The other side of the mind bug's quote is that it is important, or it isn't just about coffee sleeves and dresses and, kind of kitschy trivial stuff. These mental stowaways, talking about implicit biases, take root in our brains, tugging us in favor of white over black, straight over gay, male over female, and impacting everything from hiring decisions to how doctors mete out medical care and judges pass sentence.
Exactly.
There you go. Right? So after Hurricane Katrina, you have the same news outlets, sometimes on the same day, such as this, August 30th, 2005, labeling the same thing in fundamentally different ways. The white people obtaining food for their family were finding it, the black people were looting it. On a Delta flight recently, somebody stopped breathing, and a young black female doctor leapt into action and was all but prevented from delivering care by not one but two flight attendants, the first of which said, is your medical license real? The second one said, what were you doing in Detroit today? And So, and this doctor gave an interview that night where she said, I think one of the big problems here is that when a lot of people think of a doctor, they still think of an older white guy. And for a lot of reasons, I don't look like that. And as bad as it is to hear about the actions of those flight attendants, I think what really needs to be examined is that unless these two flight attendants who were white are outright some of, if not the most racist people in the tri-state area that day, I can't imagine they're trying to make things worse. I can't imagine they were trying to make things worse. And please don't take what I'm saying as endorsing or condoning their behavior, but you have to think, were they really trying to make the situation worse? And I don't think they are. And predictably, Delta comes out with a statement like Starbucks did last summer, where the reflections of these employees do not reflect the values of Delta. I'm thinking, yeah, that's true, like a mission statement conscious level, but obviously at an unconscious, in the moment level, there are unconscious values of your very human employees that are an issue. Maybe we need to not automatically demonize them and start talking about why. So let's see. So here's another one. Ken Griffey Jr., hometown hero, won every Gold Glove at center field with the Seattle Mariners in the 1990s, and this is the guy that made wearing hats backwards cool. He was inducted to the Hall of Fame a few years ago with the most now the second most votes ever. And he spent the last 2 summers driving around the country in a custom tour bus by himself to watch 2 of his kids play college sports. Multiple times while he's been filling up with gas or getting food somewhere, somebody comes up to him, walking across a parking lot, and says, "Hey, do you think you could ask the owner if we could take a look around the bus?" This guy's worth $100 million. He could afford a whole fleet of these buses. Would they carry those same set of assumptions across a parking lot had he been white? I think the answer is no. He cannot own the bus in their minds because he's working for the guy that owns the bus. And Griffey every time says, "It's my bus," and no, you cannot live with it. So, good for him, yeah. And I bet he should say worse, but again, then there's a perception that he's just some mad black guy. I'm starting to realize why. People recognize these guys at all? They made the news. They're best friends, first graders, and they got the same haircut to trick their teacher so she wouldn't be able to tell them apart. I mean, it's like heartbreaking and heartwarming simultaneously. Because they're not being ironic, they don't see color. And again, think of the Stroop thing. It is, I would say, impossible for people in this room, most of us, to get into the mindset that these kids are in, where color is truly not an issue. Because, they're not trying to sugarcoat anything. They're trying to trick their teacher. This is devious. I love it. Recently, I did a talk, actually the one white guy that was at that Luncheon Learn invited me to give a talk at St. Monica, St. George, the church, in Clifton. And at the end, this mom said that she picked up her 5-year-old son last year at a Christmas pageant at a school, and she noticed that the Santa that was there was one of the black young teachers, this guy. And she said to her son as he's getting in the car, "Hey, I noticed Santa Claus showed up at the party." And he said, "Yeah, but he wasn't the real Santa." And the mom said, "Oh yeah, how could you tell?" And he said, "Because the real Santa's not that skinny." Yeah, I mean, it's like Reader's Digest quality. This is wonderful. And so I would say, some people care about this stuff. Some people won't walking out the door. For the ones that do, you're going to come up against the harsh reality that I came up against a couple of years ago, which is what possible dent can any one of us have? And even the most dedicated and compassionate among us, what dent could we have as an individual in this big, huge, nebulous problem? And I'll just end with this. When I have little kids around this age at the Freedom Center, I always ask them, what weighs more? All the elephants in the world or all the ants? And the little kids always say elephants, hands down. Ants outweigh elephants worldwide about 10,000 to 1. It's not even close. We do not have an intuitive appreciation of how small things add up to big things, and how a lot of individual efforts can combine to create some big meaningful change. So I'm not saying you guys aren't working hard. I'm not saying that you're not doing your best, but I am saying that we need to work harder because we have to do better. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, here you go. I got it.
Thank you so much for your talk. Did you, you talked kind of fast and I didn't know whether I misunderstood what you said. Did you say that the brain is a big waste of energy?
No. it is a huge consumer of energy.
Oh, I thought you said waster of
No,
energy.
it is, yeah, no,
Okay.
it's, I mean, we don't really know. I guess we could do it better if we knew what was happening, but like, if you think of the iceberg, its cognition is thought to be about 95% is under the surface. This is like an unbreakable barrier. Because any given second, your brain is being bombarded by like 11 million bits of information. You can juggle 40 of these at most consciously. The rest is being filed away under these drawers and, you know, hoping to get you through the day. So no, it's not so it turns out that old phrase about you only use 10% of your brain is pretty true, but for the different reasons that we thought. Right? It's because the other 90% is really busy.
I just have one comment about this issue, and it was a big learning experience for me. I'm a nurse, and I was doing dialysis on a young African-American guy who lost his kidneys from drugs. And when you do dialysis, you spend a lot of time with the patient. And we were talking, I said, well, you know, I was raised with a lot of prejudice. He said, Bernadine, I'm shocked. You act so natural, I thought you were raised with black people. Now, that to me was a gift, because it taught me that people act weird around black people and don't know it, and also the way is to really, you know, we have to be integrated. We have to integrate our lives. That's the only way.
Yeah, because we're not segregated, but we remain very separated, you know? And yeah, I think that's an issue.
Yeah, when would you say prejudice gets hold of a young person's mind?
So, I think it starts like really young. Well, I guess we can't play it, but like there's a 2-minute video that you should all see on YouTube. I think I probably could play it, but the big ones like gender and race are pretty much set in stone by 10. They really start to firm up by between 5 and 7. And like
7 or 8, carefully thought.
yeah, I mean, like, and I'll tell you, I mean, so the ballet riddle that I did, do people know, so I ripped that off of a really famous riddle. A boy and his dad are in a bad car accident. People have heard this riddle? Some people haven't? Okay, so I'll say it, and then for the people that have never heard it, I would like you to blurt out an answer. Boy and his, Yeah, dad. Yeah, boy and his dad are in a bad car accident, and they're taken to different hospitals. As the boy is wheeled into the hospital, the surgeon walks out and says, I can't operate on this boy. He's my son. For the people that have never heard this before, how could this be possible? Who could that surgeon be?
Mother.
Okay. Do you think that's the original answer? It is no longer even close to what I hear on a day-to-day basis. It is, you know, right as well. Which would be what? For every 2 kids that say mom, 5 say what? Other dad. Right? Other dad. And so far fewer people say mom now than I was in high school, 12 years ago. And what has also changed in that 12 years is that women are far more likely to be doctors than they were then. And yet, this is what's happening. And so, people, that's a big shift in a generation. And, the Freedom Center vacillates between being incredibly liberal or incredibly conservative based on the tour group and generally the state represented by that tour group. And, a lot of times when it's liberal, people are like, hooray, we're finally making progress, until a female surgeon pipes up and says, wait a minute, I didn't go to Harvard Medical School with 60% of my class just to be forgotten in this whole new way. But that's what's kind of happening. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good presentation.
Thank you.
Let's see. I think you pointed out some interesting learning principles that, in fact, Madison Avenue uses against us, and they train us to be prejudiced and biased and all of that. The other thing, you mentioned some of this is out of control, out of awareness, and out of control, and I don't think that's necessarily true. I think you've done a good job of getting it into your awareness and into your control, and I think if we pay enough attention to it, we can do that.
Yeah, you can't manage what you can't measure, kind of thing. And it's funny you say that, because every time I kind of go through that slide, I always think like that I don't really agree with what I'm saying in terms of the control part too, because you might not be able to react, you might not be able to force yourself to see these as they really are, but like you can have appreciation that you might be seeing them in ways that are off.
Are you aware of the symphony music bias?
Is it the men and women, the curtain?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am. Actually, that's the, so what he's talking about is, I want to say the San Francisco Orchestra Symphony, but a big major orchestra years ago.
Most of them now are smart
Yeah.
enough to use a curtain.
And years ago, they
You looked at the person, and you then decided which was the best person.
yes, yeah,
And then more recently, because epidemiologists have gotten to them, the more recent thing is, you put a curtain there and you listen
yeah.
to the applicant. And when they do that, two things have changed. There are far more women that are hired, far more non-whites who are hired.
Yeah, so what he's talking about is,
And my point is that it's an unbiased, it's an unknown bias.
Well,
People who are biased.
yeah, exactly. You are, you can't just think your way across these things. So what he's talking about is the inability of large orchestras years ago, even though the men and women would try out at roughly the same rate, men were significantly, more likely to get hired into the orchestra. So the thing I know is, yeah, they did put a curtain in. They also, most places have really thick carpet to deaden the footfalls of everybody walking in, because you can definitely, I mean, I could still tell when I'm at my parents' house who's coming down the stairs based on the pitch, So they could, lo and behold, you put men and women in a vacuum where only their playing ability is what's on display, they start being able to hire more women overnight, because I think a lot of these people are not secretly, really trying to be biased. Like deep down, they're not hiding it. You literally lose the ability to be the impartial, objective observer. A lot of us already think we are, right? So, yes, sir.
I had a really good friend, David Ruhmkorff, who's died now, and some of you may have known him. But he was invited to the Anne Frank House, with others, to develop a curriculum on racism. And when he came back, he had developed a curriculum, but he said it can only be used with black people together and white people together, not mixed. And that was because of this bias you're talking about, that they could not admit where they were biased.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned that getting this information across the different groups it's like sports. Like there are matchups that are conducive to people, and I'm not saying that I agree with what you just said, but I'm saying I've learned that it's not just the outright information as much as the conditions in which it's presented and framed that people, because a lot of people feel like you're coming down on them with this stuff. Like I went to Richmond High School. It's on the east side on the river, very working class, blue collar. Not everybody went to high school kind of high school, or not everybody went to college kind of high school. So this is like, if you say like white privilege, they're gone. They've checked out of the conversation because, food stamps and white privilege cannot coexist. They can. The problem is that there's so much being lost in translation in terms of like what terms, because the kind of guys I went to high school with, they use privilege like the way Robin Leach would use it, like caviar and gold bars and yachts, and it's more like the hand washing thing, which you don't realize that it's an advantage because it's like an unconscious advantage. Black people are, I think, generally a lot more aware that they have a hard time doing the hand washing thing than we are that we don't. And I think that's, yes, sir. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Listen, racial bias is a tremendously complicated subject. Maybe some of you remember a wonderful book of 50 years ago or more by Richard Wright, a great American writer who was black, called Native Son. It helped me to understand that if I don't park in a certain place, as I used to do around Music Hall, I had a certain place I would park, but I had to travel an alley to get to Music Hall. And occasionally somebody would pass through that alley, just be me and him, often him. And I told my children, I don't think maybe they said, you shouldn't park there anymore. Well, I tell you, Richard Wright would understand this perfectly on my part. If a black man passed me in the alley, I was more afraid. And he said, yes, you will have to be afraid, black people, because of the way you've treated them. You will need to be afraid. And so I'm just saying it's a terribly we hope today we're not as discriminating as we have been. We hope we're not, but we still mistreat terribly blacks in this city, for instance. They are, what, 2/3 of the poor people living here, which is nearly half the city, are African American. And so our relations, unfortunately, are colored by that. And our fears, and of course, we all have, I live in a black neighborhood. I mean, we're a little over half black. I know black people well. In my neighborhood, we hardly think about each other's race, you know. But in certain places, one better think about it.
Yeah. I just wanted to say in the short time since I first talked to Ryan, and we got the kind of mini version of what he did today, I can at least be a little more self-reflective when I say and do things. So that's kind of like, where is that coming from? And not necessarily punish myself for it, but start to become aware of it. And you can change your behavior when you become aware of what is driving it.
Yeah, but you have to become aware. I'd also add that humans are awful at introspection, just at an individual level. They call it the biased blind spot, which is like I can walk into a room and see everybody else behaving in any number of biased ways and have virtually no chance of seeing myself doing the same thing. I say this because maybe also what you guys have the opportunity to do in this kind of a setting is be close enough with family or friends or fellow Democrats or God forbid Republicans, and to be able to have the buddy system basically, which is saying with somebody you're comfortable with, which is I'm trying to get better on this stuff. I know that I might miss some things that I don't realize that I'm doing, and so if you see me doing anything, say something to me. In a way that would be we have each other's backs, because I think we're all really. Even the people that are dedicated in trying to spot this stuff, blind spot's a good term because they're hard to see, right? So yeah, what else?
I just, whenever I encounter people who tell me that they're not racist, I always ask them, where did you grow up? And they said, well, are you racist? And I said, yeah. You can't grow up in a racist society and not absorb, inculcate some of it, I think it's almost impossible. And I admire the younger generation, the ones that I know, who almost seem to have left it behind them. It's very impressive and it's inspiring. But I just heard the word discrimination used. You could play the same sort of game with that you played with bias. Do you discriminate? I discriminate all the time.
We did not evolve from the people that waited around on the jungle path to decide whether that was a vine or a snake, right? We have to be able to tell what things are and what things aren't. It's a human characteristic.
All right. What's bad is unfair discrimination, illegal discrimination, but to be discriminating used to be an admirable thing.
Well, discerning still is.
Discerning still is.
Which is like the same thing.
Yeah.
And so no, I think once we have to be able to tell what things are and what they aren't. Like to your point, when we start using that awareness in ways that are making things unequal. And again, also we didn't talk a lot about it, but again, think of bias toward. I work with a lot of companies, and a lot of these companies don't have the opportunity to discriminate against minorities and women on the level that they would need to explain how they continue to be so white and male. But what they do have the opportunity to do all the time is interview other white guys that went to the same colleges and like the same things, and you don't interpret that as bias toward. You interpret it as like, welcome aboard, you're the right fit, you're exactly what we're looking for. So start to just, realize that, yeah, we have biases against things that make us not like them. We also have preferences toward things, and we just don't recognize it as like, this is radically influencing my decision making because this guy went to Illinois and likes Radiohead and plays squash. So yeah, I think, the goal of this stuff can't be to make like June implicit bias month. Like the goal, this stuff is too difficult. And some places that is the goal, they're really interested in this, but, we didn't get here by accident. It took a lot of concerted effort, whether we realized the effort was being made or not. And so, to get away from this stuff, I think, yeah, it's going to be a lot more of, and I'll pull back. What else? Hold on.
One last question.
Oh,
One
okay.
last question.
Who gets the last one? Who should have the last one?
I'm wondering if you've read the book White Fragility by White People Are Afraid to Talk About Racism.
I have not read it. It's probably in the top 5 of books that people ask me about.
Okay.
No, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, and I, it's like privilege in general. I mean, or not in general, but privilege is, I think a lot of white, probably all men, but like, white men I deal with a lot, and it's like this. How could I ever have anything close to fragility if I can beat you in arm wrestling? It's like kind of like the mindset, and it's true that but it's also like they're going to be least likely to ever admit any type, that they're touchy or like right after the Covington Catholic thing happened, okay, in D.C. We had a bunch of people from Covington Catholic come in, and some of these kids were like, in a million years, and it wasn't directly related to that, but like, it was just remarkable. Like, I got a 29 on my ACT, and in parentheses, with every conceivable advantage at an elite, private high school. And they know a kid from Hughes High School who got a 27, and got into Michigan and they didn't with their 29. And how is that fair in a billion years? And I want to say, be smarter. Like, I'm far more impressed with this kid's score at Hughes than I am with your score. I'm sorry you're not as smart as your parents told you were. That's not other people's fault, like they're not taking your spot. I can't say all that or I get fired, but like these are the kind of kids that because my goal is not to, I'm not trying to piss people off intentionally, but I do think that it's not in these white kids, especially boys, long-term advantage, because it wasn't in mine, to go out into a world that is tailor-made for you not to fall on your face. Because they haven't, and I didn't, develop the same kind of work ethic and discipline and, spirit, resilience that I see other groups having to develop by default all the time. And so, like, maybe they are, I don't know, like, I hear, that there's a straight, or there's an LGBT club at my high school, why can't we have the straight club? Like, that's high school, man, like, that's what it is, like, it's not, society's not coming down on you, but I also realize that they're also going to think that society is, Anyway, well, thank you guys very much. I enjoyed talking to you.
Ryan, thank you. And now what is lunch? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming today. You have been a great audience. Thank you. Make sure you bring home an extra copy of our schedule to share with somebody. We have lots of copies of that. Ryan, you can get your lunch now.
Great. I also, do you think it'd be okay if I could send along to either Elizabeth or whoever a quick survey, and maybe some of you could fill it out, all of you won't, but some of you could? Okay, great. Because I always know it goes well, but they need me to get testimonial.
Do you sometimes, just the underground, black person that sometimes gives such a talk?
No. At this point, not really, because I created this, so like I'm the manager of the museum. I will say what's been remarkable is, and this is just personal, but like my only fear starting a few years ago doing this stuff was that there'd be a credibility issue in terms of like what I look like, where we are, and what I'm talking about. And that's what is the weird part, because it turns out, like, one white guy a week would come and say early on, like, after having this kind of talk, and he'd say, man, this is great, but like, do you ever wonder how much better this would be if you were black? And early on, I'd say, yeah, like I do, I wonder about it all the time. And then I bet you conservatively 10 times the people, like the number of black people have come in to basically say the opposite, which is that, it'll be a black couple and they'll say, listen, me and my wife came in today, you see your name written here, we were just talking, we both thought you were going to be black. Like, we are not unhappy that you're white. And early on I'd say, what are you talking about? And they would say, well, if I'm in there, it's going to be a black thing. If it's my wife, it's going to be a woman thing or a black woman thing. People can't think those things about you, and so they won't, and so they'll believe whatever you tell them. And I remember thinking, there's no way that's true. That's like 3 years ago. And I got to tell you, I bet 1 out of 5 times I give a talk at a company, this talk, somebody will find me within a half hour and very politely and quietly ask me in my ear if I have a black girlfriend. Or they don't ask that, but I should say that. Yeah, maybe I have a black boyfriend. They said, no. But like, but yeah, like it's wild. Like, why are you? It's like, anyway. Okay. Well, thanks again. Yes.